Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm going to be creating an entry using the Just As He Said March devotional kit from Creative Retreat Kits. Now, I'm only going to have one video this month, and I am like trying my best to get this one video done. Those of you who are following me on Instagram know that I suffered an abdominal muscle tear a few weeks ago, and so I am waiting for surgery. I'm going to have surgery. So I'm going to be kind of hit or miss with how long I can sit at my desk and get anything done. As it is, just the amount of time it's taking me to pull everything together for this page, I'm hurting. So I'm going to try to get this done as best as I can, but I didn't want to not have something for you guys. And this is an idea that I've had kind of mulling around in my mind that I wanted to get out. So I am working with the devotional content. However, I'm kind of like pivot away from the main focus of the devotional content. The devotional content is fantastic, though I know most of you, have already been working through it. The creative team has already been working through it because we're towards the end of the month. So I'm going to focus in on this passage here in Hosea, chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. And this really stood out to me and is something that I have been seeing kind of applicable to the world today and something I wanted to journal on. So here in Hosea 6, 1 through 3, it says, "Come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, but he will heal us. He has injured us, but he will bind up our wounds. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will restore us, that we may live in his presence. Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge him. As surely as the sun rises, he will appear." And so if you've done any kind of studying in the Old Testament, you've seen this cycle over and over and over again that happens in the Old Testament where God's chosen people, the Israelites, go through this cycle of following God for a period of time. They begin to rebel against God. God disciplines them. They turn back to God, and then that cycle will repeat itself. We see this before their time in the promised land. We see this multiple times on their way to the promised land, where, they are kind of faithfully following him and they start to complain or to rebel or do their own thing. God punishes them, either making them, stay out of the promised land for a period of time before they can re-enter, things of that nature. And so we see that again and again in the Old Testament. And so I think this is such a good illustration and a good reminder for us in today's day and age. I'm just looking, I live here in America and looking at what's going on in our country. And I believe we're kind of in a similar cycle. This country was founded with God as the center of, everything that we base our laws off of and everything that we wanted to do here in this country. And then over the years, I'm starting to see the shift of us turning away from God and our focus being less on God. And we're seeing some of the detrimental effects of that. And so I think there's going to be this period of time where we want to, direct back and turn our attention back to God. And that is my prayer for our country, especially, but I know around the world, that we would just have our focus on God. And that's so important. And then for our own personal lives, I don't know how many times that I'm walking along with God and then I'll think I know how to do it on my own, do my own thing, or kind of turn away and do my own plan. And then I go through a desert season and God has to kind of take me through this period of refinement and get me to focus back on him. And so I wanted to do some journaling based on that here in Hosea. But also you could go into some really great study just looking at those 3 verses here in chapter 6 and kind of how that parallels with the Easter story coming up with Christ's death, his, in the tomb for 3 days and then resurrection. And we see that towards the end of these verses here. And so I really think it's neat to see the foreshadowing that happens in the Old Testament to the New Testament. And so there's a lot of exciting things that you can kind of discover as you study the Old Testament. So don't just write off the Old Testament. I know a lot of people have more fun spending time in the New Testament, but there's some really great things to study here in the Old Testament. And Hosea is one of those books I haven't really done a whole lot of study in. And so it's been nice to spend some time here. So what are we going to do for art? Let's jump to that. So I have the stencil that came with the kit is this leaf one. They also have a floral add-on that you can pick up. These are super fun. There's a lot of different ways you can use stencils. I'm going to be using these in a technique that I had done in the past using stamps, but I'm going to use a mixture of stamps and stencils today and acrylic paints. And I'm going to show you how I do that. This technique really isn't going to work with watercolors or a translucent medium like that. It's best to use acrylic paints or an opaque medium such as that. So I've got distress paints pulled out. You can use regular acrylic paints. And we're just going to do these really fun, kind of inspired by these watercolor florals down in here. And then I have some stickers pulled out to create my title. And then I will do my journaling off camera. So let me go ahead and put you guys on fast forward and we will put this page together.
All right, so I'm going to start by penciling in the main
focal point of my little bouquet I'm going to create. So I've got the 2 stencils here, and I'm just using a pencil and a very light hand to roughly lay down some lines. These are just guide marks. These are going to get painted over with the paint. So you don't want to use, a pen or something dark. You don't want to press too hard because we are going to cover this up with paint. So this is just to give myself some coloring book lines to paint over. Also, don't be afraid to flip your stencils over so that changes the orientation of the image. Also, you can see in this second set of leaves, I'm only using a part of that leaf stencil. And so that gives me a little more variety with those stencils and makes it look like, it's not just one image repeated a bunch of times, if that makes sense. And then for the stamped images, I'm going in with a light ink color. So I just went through my inks and picked what the lightest color I had was, which is this yellow one from Creative Retreat. And I'm stamping those down. Again, these are just guide marks. So I've used distress inks before. You even could get away with using like an older ink pad that's maybe kind of blotchy and faded and doesn't give you a good impression. This is just to give you some guidelines to paint over. So now that I have all of those down and kind of shaped how I want them to, I can start painting everything in. So I've plopped out some colors of distress paints over on a nonstick craft sheet. And then I have a smaller flat-ended paintbrush, but you could, whatever you're comfortable working with. And I am roughly painting in. I want multiple colors on my brush. That gives me a lot of interest and movement in what I'm painting in a quick way. With distress paints, I've found layering is the best way to work with these. So I go lighter color first and then add my darker shadow elements. And then I kind of move on to some other areas, let that set of painting dry a little bit. And then I go back in with white and my highlight colors. So light shade, dark shade, and then lightest shade again on top. And it does not have to be perfect. I want this to be messy and imperfect. The messier, the better. So I don't care if I've got leftover dirty paint on my paintbrush. That actually adds some more interest to these florals as I paint them. And to be honest with you, as I watched this back, I was like, wow, I can't believe that I painted that. Like that looks like that. Like it's so easy to achieve when you have a whole bunch of different colors on your paintbrush. It just makes it so easy to do. Really anybody can do this technique. So here you can see I went back to that big red flower and was adding the white highlights to the top. And so I'm just using my lines as kind of a guide for the direction of my paint. So you're wanting your paintbrush to kind of go along the direction of the petals, if that makes sense. And, rather than doing perpendicular lines to the petals. This is the one rule that I think you need to stick to is to keep the movement of your brush going in the direction of the petals, and that's going to give you the best results. But you can see how quick this comes together. I added a little bit of color contrast to the centers of those flowers, and then moving on to the leaves, here you can see I'm going in with my lightest blue, my medium or darker blues. I'm even adding a little bit of yellow in there, which gives me this really pretty green. And then as that dries a little bit, I'll go back in with some white and add some highlights to the top. Distress paints are very, very fluid paints. And so if you find that you're kind of struggling with this technique, maybe switch to regular acrylic paints. I first did this with regular acrylic paints. They're a little bit heavier and thicker. And so they don't quite blend as much. So when you have a lot of color on your brush, it maintains those different colors. Whereas distress paints have a tendency to want to like blend together because they're more fluid. So, but I like that they dry really quick. They also are very flat. So even though I'm like gooping a ton of paint on here, it's not causing a lot of dimension on the page. So it's a little bit easier to like write over, or, it's just not as chunky. So just use what you have and what you're comfortable with. But you can see how fun that is. Just adding the yellow in there just adds a lot of variety. I don't even care. At one point here, I get a little bit of red left on my paintbrush. There's a little red in the leaves, and that's okay. I want this to be very loose and kind of impressionistic rather than realistic. That's not what I'm going for. I have found with my particular style, if I go for intentionally not looking realistic, it looks better than if I try to make it look like a realistic flower. Going in with the last leaves here. And you could stop at this point. You do not have to go back in and do the stamping and adding lines, but I'll show you how this comes together if you want a little bit more definition. But I'm going to add some paint splatters just to create some more movement and kind of fill in the blank area of the page. That way I have some color other places other than just that bottom right-hand corner. And then I made sure that was really 100% bone dry. And then I'm going to lay my stencil back over the images, the various parts that I did here. And then I've pulled out a micron pen, and this is a number 1 micron pen. So it is a like felt tip nib. It almost is like a marker. So the bigger, the better, because writing over paint will destroy your micron pens if you're using like a 0.02 or a, 0.03. Those really tiny ones will get messed up if you're writing over acrylic paint. So I'm just going in, and again, it's not going to be a perfect lineup, but this just is going to add some contrast. And then it's also going to help your eye kind of see what these blobby, colorful images are. So this gives some structure to those leaves, gives some structure to those flowers. And then for the ones that I stamped, I'm just going in with some archival black ink and stamping that over the top. You can fill in any areas that maybe didn't stamp 100% with that same micron pen. And it all kind of looks the same. And then I'm stamping in some just plain black leaves, and I will leave these unpainted. And that is just to add some contrast. I like that mix of like filled in colored elements with just black and white elements. That's really, we see that a lot in Bible journaling. It's kind of a popular technique right now. And slam bam, there you go, done. Just adding a little black detail to the center of the florals, and that big, giant, colorful bouquet is done. And it was seriously so simple, so easy to just throw a few colors together and use those stencils, use those stamps as guides, but you still get this really pretty, like hand painted effect using stencils. So I think some of us sometimes are hesitant to use stencils because I don't know about you, I don't always like the look of a stencil when you just blend ink through it and it's just, that's all you do to it. I like to do a little bit more and kind of stretch the creativity when I use my stencils, I guess. For my title here, I'm just pulling from that verse in 1 there, Return to the Lord. They're lowercase letters in the stickers this month, so I used the little dot from one of the question marks to add to the L to make it a capital L, and that totally worked. It might not bother you to have Lord lowercase, but I try to have that uppercase when I can. And then I'm going to go in and add some of those wonky hearts just to kind of sprinkle in and fill in some areas. Outline my stickers. I always tell myself, okay, don't outline this time, just leave them, but I just can't do it. I have to outline my letter stickers. Filled in a little journaled prayer, and that is it. So there is a look at the finished page today. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the links down below in the description box for all the products used today. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.